Good
It's
afternoon.
a great pleasure for me to welcome you to our SEDF conversation. Today we will focus on the current situation in Pakistan. The South Asian country is facing at the moment its most severe economic and political crisis in its history. Earlier this month, the public order got shaken by an extraordinary level of violence and unprecedented events like the attack on installation of the all-powerful army, government buildings, and even partly on national symbols like the Jinnah House. Considering that Pakistan is a nuclear-armed country facing threats from international terrorist groups and has more or less with most of its neighbors extremely complex and difficult relations. The situation in Pakistan is a severe challenge not only for domestic state and society, but also is a major concern for the international community. I think it's obvious that the stability of the world's fifth most populous country is at serious risk at the moment. By having said this, our today's webinar aims to contribute to the causes and also to the understanding of the causes and potential consequences of the current turmoil in the country. It's such a pleasure for me to welcome our speakers today, Mr. Shams, Dr. Zingel, Dr. Siddiqui, and Dr. Nisar. I thought we start with Mr. Shamil Shams, who should open the debate. But please give me 1 second to introduce Mr. Shamil Shams. He's a senior editor and reporter at the Asia desk of Germany's international broadcasters called Deutsche Welle, with seat in Bonn. He has been covering Afghanistan and Pakistan as a reporter and analyst for the last 15 years. Mr. Shams is a London School of Economic alumnus and has written extensively on security issues, Islamism, and geopolitics, of course, with focus on the region. Shamil, it's a pleasure for me to give you the word, and we are looking forward to your views.
Thanks very much for having me, and I'm really honored to be in this esteemed company with such great scholars and intellectuals. As a journalist, I have been covering Pakistan for quite some time, and I must say that this time it is a little bit more complicated than what it used to be. And there has been criticism as well that we are not reporting objectively, although we try our best to report about human rights situation, what is happening in Pakistan, what happened in Pakistan when former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif was ousted, how the 2018 elections were allegedly orchestrated by the military and all that. And then Imran Khan was brought to power. And I was there in Islamabad covering the Pakistani elections at the time. Imran Khan was very close to the military. And then what has been happening since his ouster, that we see that Imran Khan has taken on the powerful army in an unprecedented way, which we possibly have not seen in the past few decades in Pakistan. So there is now a crackdown, as you mentioned, the May 9th events, and Imran Khan was arrested briefly, and then he was released by the country's top court, the Supreme Court. And in between, there were clashes and attacks. Imran Khan's supporters took to the streets and they attacked the public and private property, military installations and all that. Now there is a crackdown, and there is an allegation that the international media, human rights groups are not covering it adequately. We are not raising our voice against the human rights violations of Pakistan. We interviewed Amnesty International's officials. We interviewed other human rights organizations and all that. So the problem right now, which I see, is what is happening in Pakistan is a structural crisis, but that is something which has been ongoing for quite some time. It's not a new phenomenon, and it's not going to end here. It's a cycle, and it will continue for quite some time. The important issue right now is, as I talked about when former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif was ousted, there was an issue of civilian supremacy in Pakistan. The same question has been raised again. There is an issue, a slogan that of civilian supremacy. Popular leaders in Pakistan are not liked by the military establishment. So as soon as someone becomes popular, they try to cut the politician to his or her size, and it has been a problem for quite some time. The problem with Khan's own vision of civilian supremacy has been very flawed. He does not believe that the army should be subservient to parliament or civilian leadership. What he possibly aims is that the army should be subservient to his wishes and his party's whatever the party desires, his personality, his person in particular. So I see that when CNN interviewed Khan earlier, Fareed Zakaria, he said the same thing, that the Pakistan needs a powerful army, and a powerful army is very important because we have seen Islamic countries that they have been devastated when the army had been weakened and all that. But the problem is that India has a powerful army, but India's army is answerable to its politicians and civilian leaders and parliament. This is not happening in Pakistan. At the same time, it is also important that the liberal sections of Pakistan are possibly not as vehemently opposing the crackdown on Imran Khan supporters and the human rights violations that are taking place, the military courts and all that. Even the political parties that are in power right now, the PDM coalition, they are not criticizing, for instance, they are supporting the military courts, which no civilian leader, politician should do. The crackdown on Imran Khan supporters should also be condemned. The journalist Imran Riaz he was taken away 2 weeks ago. No one knows about his whereabouts. So serious human rights violations are taking place in Pakistan. And as journalists, as reporters, and as human rights activists, as civil society activists, I think it's important that we raise our voice against these kind of violations. The military is trying to reassert itself, which is problematic, but there is no vision on any side of the aisle, whether it be the incumbent government or Imran Khan's party, Imran Khan himself. They all lack a vision how to deal with the situation. In one way or the other, the army keeps asserting itself, and it is happening again. So the crisis is a complicated one, I understand, but there are a couple of things I would like to go back. That it's a cyclical issue. It has been happening in Pakistan forever. It's a structural issue. It's not about the incumbent army chief or the former army chief or Shehbaz Sharif, the prime minister, or Imran Khan or anyone else. It's the whole state. In Urdu, we have this couplet. It's a line which says, "Meri tameer mein musmar hai surat kharabi ki." There is an inherent flaw in the whole architecture of the state fabric since the Pakistan was conceived and became independent. So that has been happening. There has been a tug of war between civilians and the military establishment forever, for so many decades now. First it was Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, then it was Benazir, Nawaz Sharif, and Imran Khan now. The vision that the civilian leaders could challenge the military establishment is to deal with the structural issues, how to deal with the country's economy, how to run the state, how to make the army subservient to civilian leadership and parliament. It is really lacking. And the third point is that despite the fact that, like personally, I do not like Imran Khan's politics, and I think his politics is not very democratic. But when the crackdown by the military is happening against his supporters and his party officials, and the kind of pressure we see coming from the military, this is also very alarming, and this should not be. I think it's important that we raise our voice against these kind of human rights issues.
Thank you very much, Shamil, for this excellent introduction to the topic and giving an overview about so many different concerning aspects. I don't have the time to go so much into details now, but in particular, the points you mentioned, the structural flaws and the lack of institutionalization we have besides the army. In particular, what you mentioned with Imran Khan and his unwillingness to institutionalize civilian control instead of this bringing the personal aspect of it in the forefront. But I guess Aisha can much more talk about this. And I don't want to go in this issue, but also the human rights violations we have now. It's nothing new in Pakistan, but it's get such an alarming level, which we perhaps also can discuss later in our Q&A session. Talking about civil-military relations is also a very important issue for my own work. So I don't want to talk too much about it because we have Ayesha Siddiqa, who had most outstanding work on this issue. Please allow me, Dr. Siddiqa, to introduce you now. Dr. Ayesha Siddiqa has a PhD in war studies and is currently working as senior fellow in the Department of War Studies at the King's College in London. Earlier, she was a research associate at the Center for International Studies and Development at the Source University, also in London, and fellow at the St. Antony's College in Oxford. She was also a non-resident fellow at the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. Dr. Siddiqa has taught at the Johns Hopkins University and at the University of Pennsylvania. She was also a civil servant in Pakistan, including a 2-year stint working as the Director of Naval Research with the Pakistan Navy. Dr. Siddiqa, it's a pleasure for me to give you the word, and we are looking forward to your insights.
Thanks so much for inviting me and making me part of this panel. Let me start with two things here. One is that, in your introduction to the seminar, you did mention that, you talked about the current crisis, which is, one of the things you mentioned was there was this attack on Jinnah House. Now, Jinnah House is something which, of course, this is a house which was gifted to Jinnah, but Jinnah never lived here. For a long time, it has been occupied under army occupation. And I grew up in Lahore, Kent, and I've had the pleasure of going into the house, but those were the days during the 80s when one could, if you knew somebody, could go into the house, or you could walk past that house. As the military strengthened in its power, even, you would shudder even at the idea of walking on the footpath along the Corps Commander's residence. So this was the Corps Commander's residence. It's being presented. There is this emphasis in the media on this being Jinnah House, emphasizing its historical importance, which actually kind of is very situated in one of the biggest structural problems that Pakistan has, that is civil-military imbalance. And that civil-military imbalance is maintained primarily through the skewed narrative that you have. You always play up the military, always play up their dignity and what they bring to the table, how they've kept the country united, etc., etc. And now this current crisis, which in some ways is not big, in some ways not small. I would tend to kind you kind of disagree a bit with my friend Shamil Shams. It's not that things have not happened before. So partly the problem we see today is structural, military, creating political parties, military helping major political players form political parties and come into power. I mean, this is something which goes back to Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in the 1970s and 1960s and 70s. So from Bhutto to Nawaz Sharif to Imran Khan. Of course, I wouldn't put Benazir Bhutto in that category, but MQM, Muhajir Qawmi Movement, or Mutahida Qawmi Movement, even that. So many parties have been formed, many leaders catapulted to power by the army. So that is, and military, once they have them there, they remove them when they part ways, when these very stakeholders try to push back, try to kind of take power away from the military strikes. So in that respect, it's more of the same, nothing much. And the way I see crises ending in Pakistan is that there is nothing. I mean, the bigger crises, in fact, I'll tell you, for Pakistan is that it's more of the same. Pakistan's crisis is that nothing is about to change. As far as its economy is concerned, as far as its ability to change, have structures, its deinstitutionalizing, its weak structures, so all of that, which make a mega crisis, all these problems remain the same. So that way, I kind of agree with Shamin. Um, Now, where I tend to kind of disagree is that it's after a long time that we've had this outpouring of sorts by the people, uh, targeting the military. And this is not something which started with Imran Khan. In fact, if you go back, it started with, in some respects, with Nawaz Sharif. When Nawaz Sharif, around the time that he left the country, and when in London, he started talking about the two generals, General Faiz Hamid, the General Bajwa. That's when we see anger coming. Let me go back even further in the past. Lawyers' movement or lawyers' protest uh, in 2006, 2007, and under around General Musharraf. So what has happened with Imran Khan really is that it's years of people's frustration uh, on how the military has dabbled with politics come together. Now, the only problem being that Imran Khan himself as a phenomenon has so polarized the society that we didn't manage to get a Tahrir Square kind of an event. Pakistan, what happened recently on May 9th in Pakistan doesn't compare anywhere, either to Myanmar, where there's an ongoing protest against the military. It doesn't compare with Turkey, where, what's it called? People came out in support of Erdogan against the military, stood, in front of trucks, humiliated military men. Or that way, in 2011 in Egypt, when Hosni Mubarak was brought down by this huge public protest, there was limited number of people, and that has been Imran Khan's shortcoming, that he could not muster all that support on the streets, despite that. I would say that he remains a popular leader. I mean, recently I was listening to uh, the press conference of one of his top leaders, Asad Omar, who pointed out something which is very interesting: hold elections today. And yes, uh, Imran Khan and his party, there's a possibility that they're going to do very well in at least three provinces, or at least two major provinces. They are going to do well. So And so what you see here, in fact, is political parties. And again, this is again something which has happened before. That military has always partnered with politicians and political stakeholders uh, whenever there has been a political crisis and whenever there has been a need to push out uh, a politician that they haven't liked. So in the past, they partnered, the military partnered with um, PTI to push PPP and PMLN out. This time they're partnering with PPP, PMLN, so Pakistan People's Party, Pakistan Muslim League, JUI, and other parties in order to push Imran Khan out. Uh, the only other thing which I think looks different is that we are looking at a party which has gained prominence on the basis of building a narrative, a very powerful narrative, especially and a narrative which is so situated in Pakistan's current economic crisis. Um, Imran Khan's problem was that his governance was bad. He couldn't deliver economically, but he was pushed out of power at a time when Pakistan was negotiating with the IMF, and the world was struck by oil crises, prices going up, the cost of Ukrainian war, etc., which came to Pakistan's doors as well, like any all other countries. So the cost of living has increased, inflation has increased. I'm not going to delve into all of that, but merely to point out that he was a beneficiary of this crisis. I mean, uh, his popularity has increased, and people who are very nervous and who are very agitated by how Pakistan is run began to believe in his narrative. There is a huge population park today. Pakistan 64, then more than 64% of population is between 18 and 35. These people admire Khan. There are women who admire Khan. I mean, you look at the details of his vote bank, of his support base, and you'd realize that here is a different kind of a crisis in Pakistan. And that crisis is that these people require, demand a new leadership, and he seems to be theoretically filling that gap. So, if you hold elections today, and what the military has managed to do, let me come to just give me a couple of minutes on civil military relations. So what the military has tried to do is it's tried to push back Imran Khan, who has a certain level of popularity and who's extremely popular in the diaspora. I mean, that is something we haven't even begun to look at and think about. How is this frustrated diaspora going to react to what has just happened in a crisis? So what it means right now is that the military has been successful. It has managed to push back Imran Khan. His party is being broken down. There are going to be human rights violation. And part of the problem of polarization, which Imran Khan created, is that even uh, the so-called progressive elements in Pakistan, they are condemning what's happening, but they are being very shy in their condemnation. I don't see, I mean, these are friends and colleagues, who write about human rights, but who are very careful when condemning this kind of violation. That's number one. Number two, there's also the fact that uh, the polarization has affected institutions in Pakistan even further. I mean, I recently saw, for example, Human Rights Commission of Pakistan talked about uh, how they have assessed and found that the vote of no confidence against Imran Khan had no intervention from the military intelligence agencies. I don't think HRCP was qualified to do that kind of assessment, which basically means that even those kind of institutions are getting polarized and affected by Imran Khan versus the other politics. I think that is worrying. That is worrying from civil military relations point of view. That's worrying from the point of view of institutional strengthening. I think what's going to happen is two things. The army, one of the, what but before I get into that, let me emphasize that this crisis happened initially and originally because there was a crisis for the first time ever in the military institution. The military institution has never been that divided over which leader to support. And that is where the crisis, the beginning of the crisis lay, the original sin, so to speak. Um, Now, how they're going to do is that they're going to actually crack down on the party, crack down on political activism. They're going to silence with main parties, the PPP and the PMLN, on the side of the military rather against it. There will be no ideological positions taken here. I think elections possibly delayed. I don't see elections happening. I mean, while some say that there's an opinion that elections are going to happen in October, I see that they may, they be maybe pushed even to next year, not this year. I think what the military will look at is silencing of Imran Khan, and that's where diaspora matters. So essentially, what they've done in the past is send leaders into exile. Um, you know, First time around, Nawaz Sharif was sent into exile to Saudi Arabia. Second time, the same kind of destinations. Imran Khan preferred destination would be London. I mean, right now, I think generals would be negotiating with, putting pressure and building this pressure on Imran Khan so he agrees to go into exile. But I feel that he will not be sent into exile in Europe. He won't be sent to UK because that's where he has greater capacity to build a movement and push back from outside. They would like to send him to a country like Saudi Arabia or a UAE, where his phone could be taken away, where it could be silenced, and then the military picks up, the pieces and starts to build again with the same kind of a relationship with the civil society and political parties. That is a superordinate subordinate relationship. I'll finish it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Siddiqui, for your statement and your excellent summary outlining of the status of the civil-military relations in Pakistan, and to highlight so important issues like the intervention of the army in the forming and creation of political parties, which we are actually witnessing at the moment. What's going on is a crackdown of the PTI, as you highlighted, and perhaps we have later opportunity to talk more about this. Also, it was very interesting to listen to your views on the potential future of Khan, and this might be extremely insightful, interesting to follow this up and how this will develop, and this has for sure a tremendous impact on the current situation in Pakistan. Also, it was interesting that you mentioned earlier the text on army installations. Yeah, and I never saw that we will see pictures like protesters breaking in the headquarters in Rawalpindi, or vandalizing a house of a corps commander. So for me, it was unimaginable some time ago. I thought this will never happen in Pakistan, but it happened. And interesting for me were several statements by protesters. And there's one famous picture or video going viral on social media with one person who was stealing a peacock from the corps commander house and claiming this was paid by public money or by taxpayer money, and so I have the right to take it away. Which brings me actually to another important issue of the whole turmoil at the moment, the economic aspect. Yeah, because we have not only this economic empire. We were talking until now about the challenge of the political influence, of the political role of the army, but there's also tremendous impact of the army in the economic sphere. And for me, this was, for example, one major reason what I saw from my work on the China-Pakistan economic corridor, that Nawaz Sharif was trying to challenge the economic empire of the army, to bounce them back from this mega development project. But this is not the topic of today, but this highlights increasing the significance of the economic impacts or aspects of the crisis, and therefore we have an excellent expert here today in our panel, Dr. Singhel. Dr. Peter Singhel is an associate member of the South Asia Institute at Heidelberg University. He studied economics, history, as well as law, and holds a PhD in economics. He worked in the field of agriculture, applied development, regional and urban economics, with a focus on South Asian countries, especially Pakistan. Dr. Singhel served as a representative of the South Asia Institute in Islamabad. He taught at the National Institute of Pakistan Studies at Quaid-e-Azam University in Islamabad, and was a visiting fellow at the Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad. And of course, he published and taught extremely widely on South Asian affairs. Dr. Singhel, it's also for me a pleasure to give you the floor and share your insights on the economic dimension of the current situation. And I think you have to unmute.
Okay, so thank you very much for the introduction. I mean, as a topic of military and economic, I mean, nobody is more competent than Dr. Ayesha Siddiqa. She wrote the book that I always wanted to write, and many years ago, and I wanted to give it a title, The Privileged Economy. And so going through the endless privileges that the army has in Pakistan, and I remember in the Indian general said, I visited my Pakistani colleague, we could not dream of living under such conditions. So I will not so much touch on that. To be short, I have been to Pakistan since many years and have been on and off. And whenever I came to Pakistan and reading the press before, I expected then nothing to work. And you come to Pakistan, and if you're lucky, the trains are on time, and people are extremely hospitable, and many things work, especially in the difficult situations that would not work in Germany. So I find it extremely difficult to assess a situation. Here we have the problem to assess: is a political crisis as an outcome of the economic conditions, or is it the economic conditions an outcome of the political setup? Crisis we have been in Pakistan since ever. It's decades ago that we had a book, From Crisis to Crisis, on Pakistan. So what I have prepared, what I shall not do, going through the long list of economic indicators. Last year, we had the privilege of hearing my dear friend Ashfaq Khan, who is maybe one of the best economists that Pakistan has, and his assessment, and that was quite upbeat. And his assessment was on the lines of the IMF report that had been published early last year. So out of a sudden, it seems to have gone down the drain. Now, if I just rattle down the indicators that economists do, economic growth was not too bad, has come to a halt, almost. Yeah. Remittances, 9 million Pakistanis abroad sent money home, and that's the country could not continue like it does at the moment. Yeah. And again, it's 10% of GDP. The balance of merchandise trade always has been characterized by imports almost twice as much as exports. That's no problem economically as long as you have money coming in, and especially from the workers abroad. But there is very little that Pakistan can export except textiles, which make 60% of exports, and ready-made garments. It's almost nowhere as compared to India or Bangladesh. So it is imports, and imports after the crisis began, they have been reducing imports. Surprisingly, the numbers that I see, the money spent on imports for fuels have not really gone up as yet. There is services trade. Pakistan also in the what they call services in communications and computer services and so on. It's moving up, can come to a halt at the moment, but could be much better, of course, but it's not that bad. Yeah. So accordingly, the deficit in the balance of paying current accounts could be reduced by 3/4, but that needed some severe measures, and the ensuing austerity policy has been highly unpopular, was one of the triggers of the political crisis. The currency, you know that currency, the value of the rupee has been halved in 2 years. And obviously, the Pakistan government always tried to stamp that tide and that loss of value, which is a matter of most probably of prestige in the country, and wasting a lot of foreign exchange on that. Public debt reached 83% of GDP in 21, has been gone up, but we have developed countries like Japan who have much higher rates. The annual inflation, and that is obviously the final trigger for all that, reached year on year for 36% in March, most probably has risen in April and May as well. So after excessive borrowing, Pakistan was on the brink of defaulting of its debt, when the political establishment obviously seemed to have lost confidence in the PTI government. Not to forget, the army has to lose a lot if the country gets bankrupt. Yeah. The US, again and again, I mean, we have this roller coaster relation to the United States. I mean, for me, a matter of mutual misunderstandings, but usually the United States was helping Pakistan. Whether the Chinese would be ready to do it is not sure, although they seem to be helpful. What I have not touched, or what I'm not touching at the moment, is social affairs. You all know what Paris Hoodboy is telling us. It's a dismal situation when it comes to welfare, when it comes to health, when it comes to education. In Pakistan, that used to be ahead of India in all indicators, has lost that edge and now ranks behind Bangladesh and India. So the situation is, the economic situation maybe is not as bad. What obviously is bad is the bureaucracy. And in today's Dawn, there's a very good article by the former governor of the State Bank of Pakistan. What should be, and what has to be changed. So I would say, from the economic side, yeah, this crisis certainly could have been avoided. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very insightful, interesting summary about the economic situation. And it's also interesting to hear that that you rather not see the economic aspect as such a causal factor, when I got you right, for the outbreak of the violence and yeah, what happened. I hope we can talk later a little bit more, because I see we have to be a little bit more stricter in time. But nevertheless, we have still a very distinguished scholar here on board, Dr. Tissini Zar. She has a PhD from the Luis Guido Cali University in Rome. She serves as a coordinator, Project Trust at European Center for Study and Innovation in Palermo. She was visiting and guest fellow faculty at Ankara Yildirim Beyazit University in Ankara. Dr. Nisa has worked on topics such as conflict and peace, democracy, state and civil society, including gender, minorities, and religions in South Asia. She conducts academic research focused on Pakistan in both Italian and European universities, think tanks, and research organizations. On top of that, it's also a pleasure to have Dr. Nisa as the board in our SNF board of advisors. Dr. Nisa, the floor is yours. We are looking forward to your insights.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening to our very revered guests. I'm extremely delighted to be with all of you today. And especially the topic relates to all of us, like, living abroad, expats. And so as pointed out by somebody, that how this kind of a narrative building is shaping in Pakistan. I'm really interested in, as a matter of fact, I am contributing my research on the question of identity, culture, and narrative building in terms of civil society and in terms of gender. So this topic is quite close to me in my personal and in my professional capacity. So today, I think with the relevance to our theme, my topic is basically dealing with the inherent inefficiency of the normative consensus amidst the critical discourse on political narrative in Pakistan. Now, I would like to divide my presentation into a couple of points. The first is I'm going to deal with a little bit about the background of this debate on the insufficiency of the normative debate. Then I'm talking about, the legacy and the perils of the colonial process of phenomena. Then I'm talking about how we can actually, address to finding the narrative towards the civil society. So in this capacity, I've divided it into two parts. I look into it from the point of view of civil society as a political society. That is to say, like the Gramscian and the post-colonial perspective. And the second is basically dealing with the counter-core movements, which is dealing in turn with the debate on the peripheral side of the idea of civil society. Some theoretical understanding based on Anderson and Rawlsian idea, the case study of Pakistan, and some conclusions in the end. So in order to just look briefly into the background, why I say that this kind of a normative consensus is insufficient is because of the fact that the normative consensus itself entails the idea that within the democratic spheres of the civil society in Pakistan, there is an outright realization that there has to be a kind of a political narrative based on the idea of shared values of communities, norms, ethos, and culture that can play an important role in unifying the divisive forces based on nationalism, religious intolerance, sectarianism, and ethnic separatist sentiments. Such an idea itself, therefore, can be well adapted. So what we are looking in is basically a normative theory that entails that the promotion of a culture of commonalities based on a historical instances could be used for mutual recognition, and that as such, it's an effort that can set the pace for a positive change. But such an approach needs a legal kind of a structure. And so the legal inclusiveness has to be a very, instrumental part of this. However, with due regard to the existing situation on this ground, there is a kind of a debate on political exclusiveness. Such an approach could also prove highly challenging in the case study of Pakistan. In the meantime, the lessons learned from the partition of Pakistan and the case of the division of Pakistan in, for example, the division of Bangladesh and the Indian subcontinent earlier, with the human diaspora of millions and the tragedies and the bloodshed that could have been avoided, but that is still reminiscent of its consequences, and thus should provide ample rationale for not repeating the mistakes of the past. So in this sense, we are talking about, a particular kind of a discourse of civil society, which is, to say, a rule-based body, based on consent of individuals, or a society based on social contract among individuals. In other words, civil society in this way is defined as the process through which individuals negotiate, argue, struggle against, or agree to each other, and with the centers of political and economic authority as such. So this is going to take place through voluntary associations, movements, parties, unions, individuals who are actually able to play in the public domains. So to put it in a nutshell, what went wrong with the idea of this kind of a narrative of civil society? We have seen that in the post-colonial period, the state was like kind of desacralized, but differentiation between citizens among the new national elites in the towns and in the rural areas actually remained, so that the tribal logic actually overwhelmed the democratic logic of the civil society. And this is why civil society politics, where the rural is governed through customary law, harnessed urban politicians and rural-urban constituencies, develop patron-client relationships. So the colonial state actually introduced a differentiation between European and native institution. Europeans enjoyed civic rights and duties, a legal system based on the respect for individuals, public debate and associations, as well as economically based system based on the mechanism of social contract, of course. And this was seen probably in many African countries, and even in case of many Asian countries, South Asia particularly, where the Europeans had repeatedly actually been using customary tribal laws that were codified and rigidified by the colonials. Unlike the civil law, customary law actually applied to communities, not individuals, and was largely based on force. So this kind of an idea is also like argued by Partha Chatterjee, who really talks about post-colonial societies like that of India and Pakistan, and within the domains of an associational life, which is very much characteristic of these kind of post-colonial civil societies. But the problem, according to Chatterjee, is the fact that this hiatus is extremely significant, because it is the mark of non-Western modernity and of the role of enlightened elites engaged in a pedagogical mission in relation to the rest of the society. So what Chatterjee is actually saying and proposing is that the term civil society should be rejected and replaced by political society. And later on, we see that this kind of a narration is also well adapted by Mahmoud Mamdani. So what are basically the normative critical discourses that can talk about counter narratives in terms of understanding the post-colonial discourse? We say that the voices of the political actors are not only confined to political parties, but also to the active participation of citizens on the issues of local domains, like the rights to obtain free water and electricity and other such resources as land and water are considered as a series of struggles through which the marginal groups exert their influence. So seen in this way, the idea of democratic rights, membership in community organizations, as well as participation in activities like the electoral activity, changes the concept of civil to political society. So therefore, a colonial construct actually serves as a necessary tool to understand the post-colonial, where civil society emerged in the form of massive populations, which were continued to be pushed to the margins of society. Most of them did not possess any kind of status. Their voices remained marginal and unheard, and they lived in situations where the economic, political, and social positions were not even paralleled, equally with that of the post-colonial state, based on a different way to understand the mechanism of the subjects. that is the citizen's relationship with the state. Then we are talking about like the idea of civil society as political society, some kind of a variation between the Gramscian and the post-colonial writing. I don't want to go into the detail because it's like, well understood that what Gramsci debated was the idea of political society based on actually these kind of rights, civil and political rights. So again, moving towards the idea of, the counter core movements, which is covering the debate from the peripheral side, adds a very interesting narrative to the discourse of, critical understanding of the post-colonial society. So this debate on the core periphery analysis extensively investigates the mass politics of counter-core movements, variously termed peripheral sectionalism, throwing light on the politics of counter-center, counter-cultural movements and ethno-national movements as well. The study becomes important and applicable for the analysis of the counter-cultural movements within the general theoretical framework of the post-colonial society. So moving forward, I think that these are like some of the mechanisms that are available within the critical discourse on understanding, the building of that narrative of the post-colonial society. And coming back to the case of Pakistan, how do we see it applying in the case of Pakistan? Is it putting like the cart before the horse? So as with the past experiences, the landscape of Pakistan's stability does not show any signs of hope. The inherent deficiency of democracy, characterized by the failure of the political process, has been the result of preeminence of narratives emanating within the context of discourses on civil society in Pakistan that have been predominantly top-down in the focus and have lacked to address the history from below and representing the aspirations of the people, their struggles, contestations to rights and power, recalling the formation of a new order based on equity and justice that have suffered from a lack of an insufficient historical narration and are deficient in the justifiable, descriptive, and empirical illustration. So over the years, there has been a struggle to search for a sound grounding for the discourse on the civil society in Pakistan. Thus, such an effort has been futile because we have seen like the rise of so many ethno-national movements in case of Balochistan, in case of, the Pashtun factor, as well as, the Muhajir movement. So today, what has happened is that, as of course, obvious that we've been all discussing today, is that millions of Pakistani find themselves in deep state of, crisis, and Pakistan now at the brink of an economic collapse with heavy burden of inflation that has skyrocketed to dangerous proportions. Pakistan's political future remains a $1 million question, in fact. So recent days, of course, we have seen the rise of, this kind of a discontent, and even women, for example, when we talk about like gender, we are talking about also the role of women in protests and, all sorts of movements of dissent. So we have seen that kind of an identity that is shaping up in Pakistan. So even if like the worst resistance pitching political parties against one another, Khan was able to like give that kind of narrative, but now we have seen this kind of narrative like coming to its conclusion. And for our conclusion, we can presume that the case of Pakistan suggests that the creation of the new state could not suppress the national aspirations. The nation building processes were thus fraught with challenges and imbibed a different course of action. It was difficult to be built and endorsed under complex ethno-national frameworks. From this discussion, therefore, it is clear that within the context of the larger debate on a condition of normative consensus on deeply divided issues, as specifically pointed out before in case of the Pakistani civil society, it ought to be influenced by the multiple cultural and religious identities. However, even if it is assumed that such a consensus is possible at all, the indicators that are drawn from this work imply that the problem of a supposed consensual mechanism or modus vivendi has been marked and identified with many challenges. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tessin, for this interesting, detailed analysis of civil society. You made one interesting point, as of many interesting points, but I can only focus on one issue. when you talked about the tribal aspect of the society and that is overwhelming overshadowing the democratic part in the society. I think this was also a part of is a part of Kant's narrative, his popularity, that he does not belong to these tribal political dynasties, which he always used to like to emphasize, yeah, which adds to his popularity, not only among the youth, but also that he portrayed himself as an anti-establishment, anti-tribal society. I know we are running out of time. I also know that Ayesha already mentioned she must be strict in time. She has only 1 hour time. I hope you all have perhaps a couple of minutes more, but before Ayesha has to leave us, I have one question here for you. Since
Don't worry, I extended my time. I had
fantastic.
some, so don't worry, I'll stick around.
That's great news. Wonderful, great news. Since we had Tessin already looking a bit on conceptual aspects of the crisis from the civil society angle, but coming back to the civil-military relation thing, there are some theories among civil-military relations who are assuming that the declining reputation of the army or image of the army could be used as a source for civilians, understood as politicians, elected politicians, to establish some kind of civilian control, perhaps even civilian democracy, as to bounce back the military. How do you see this statement or this concept in Pakistan? Do you think that when we consider the current growing critic on the army, does this lead to such a kind of decline of the reputation? Do we see perhaps even the beginning of bouncing back the army from the political sphere, or does it rather create a backslash that we might even see a more direct role of the army in politics? What do you think, Dr. Siddiqa?
See, firstly, let me make it very clear. I don't see the military coming into power directly. I think fundamentally a shift had happened in around 2008. And that shift in the military thinking, not the civilian thinking. The military thinking was that they would shift from control of government to control of governance. And therefore, this whole concept of hybridity, hybrid civil military or hybrid military civil rule, that started off in 2013, before 2018. I don't think that Imran Khan brought in hybridity. He extended hybridity. Hybridity started with 2013 with the PMLN government. And the reason was changes in decision making. I could explain, if that's required. But to get back, military is not going to get into direct power because the situation, the crisis is more than political. It's economic, social, political. It's a bigger crisis at the moment. And to handle that, it doesn't have sufficient depth or energy, institutional energy, to do that. So it's not going to come. Second is what's going to happen. I mean, sadly, yes, this is a moment when civilians, whatever is left of the civilians, could have pushback, but there is this inability to bring about institutional changes because, again, the crisis, which is much larger in Pakistan's case, is that PTI, which is the face of the current crises of pushback against the army, its leadership wasn't actually desiring to push back the military. And in fact, to borrow from, in a way, from Tehsin's, conceptual framework, the method of politics remains very, I would say, it's a pre-capitalist socio-economic model So therefore, it's a mix of this tribal feudal power structure and capitalism. And so what we see here is uh, political parties wanting to dominate the military, to extend their power rather than challenging the military's power. So PTI leadership wanted to use the army to support it back into power. Now, the other actors, similarly, they want to dominate or to partner with the military to push Imran Khan out of power, whom they found was a threat. And this is what's going to happen now. That there's going to be in the process, there's going to be no negotiation of bringing around institutional changes in Pakistan. See, for example, strengthening of the parliament, strengthening of the judiciary, strengthening of critical civil, civilian institutions that would ensure that while the political process is strong enough, the military doesn't exercise its power, uh, and that we repeatedly don't use it. So the drama that has continued in the last 70 years uh, is going to play out even more. Uh, the only thing is that, you know, now what we saw in the crises is that the crisis for the military here was that it came very close to the thin line that divides it from excessive use of power and maintaining its legitimacy, that break. Because Pakistani military, by the way, Pakistan military, like any military in power, one should not underestimate its ability to brutalize. The state an authoritarian state has immense capability to do that. But for Pakistani military, it has used force and continues to use force in Balochistan, in tribal areas, all where the urban Pakistan, the educated Pakistan doesn't really observe on a daily basis. But to exercises in Punjab, in Karachi, in these urban centers, or in those parts of Pakistan where the army comes from. Now, it came in this period. It has come close to using force there. So my point is that what they will try to do is that there isn't really a threat from political players right now. There is no institution building. There is nobody's talking about let's have another go at restructuring of civil military of civilian control of military. The first and only time we saw that change happening was in 1974, 1975, 1976, under Zulfikar Ali Bhutto government. We have never seen a revisit. And if political parties, the parliament is not ready, is not prepared for the change, then I'm sorry, we're going to have more of the same.
Thank you very much, Dr. Siddiqa. You focused partly you highlighted the weakness of the institution, the need for institution building. From my perspective, from my observation, what I saw is there's much focus at the moment, or the sole focus on the conflict between Khan and the army. But I think you can also already see some other dimension, conflict dimension. For example, particularly between the different political institutions, namely conflict between the government, the judiciary, and the parliament. I just have the pictures in my mind about supposedly government organized protest in front of the Supreme Court after they decided that the arrest of Imran Khan was illegal, the last arrest. So do you see also a conflict between the institution, between the different branches of government in Pakistan? Perhaps, Shamil, you talked before of institutional flow. Perhaps you might have some views on this fights or struggle between the different institutions in Pakistan and this impact on the crisis?
Well, I think that various institutions will always try to bargain to assert themselves. It's only natural. I think it's not as many people in Pakistan like to believe that that it's like a simple scenario, a situation that either I feel that the politicians also try to assert themselves to the military. But it's not, as Dr. Aisha said, it's not something systematic. It's not institutional. It's something that they can bargain better with the military establishment to come into power, to use the military. Similarly, the judges and the judiciary and many civil society players as well. We see this tug of war, which is a natural process in any society. This is happening. There is a middle class now which supports Imran Khan, the youth, and also these are the people, the young people who are now supporting Imran Khan. They are the beneficiaries of this Imran Khan, this support base. They are the beneficiaries from Pervez Musharraf's time when they benefited this class to some extent, and they feel that a benign so-called military dictator, an authoritarian leader, could be a messiah, could change Pakistan's destiny, something, this kind of romantic idealism they have. So these people have benefited under the military. So they are not against this particular class. These supporters of Khan's, they are not against the military. They believe that they have the equal right to climb up the ladder of progress in society under the system that we have in Pakistan. If as the other classes, the other political forces, the Pakistan People's Party, the Muslim League, Pakistan Muslim League, and all these groups, so they consider the military an ally. So the institutional tug of war will always take place in Pakistan, and they all try to assert themselves. But we have to understand that this has now emerged. This is not going to go away by the military trying to suppress Imran Khan's voters, supporters, and party leaders. The support exists now. It is a reality. The military can crush it, like, for the time being, but in some ways, societies always go forward, and Pakistan has as well. So people will continue to challenge the military's dominance in the political sphere of Pakistan. What we have seen is that it is quite unprecedented that the way people are. I was in Pakistan a few months ago, and it's the first time the people are so critical openly. They are terribly scared of the military as well. Its power. They won't take to the streets. It won't be a Tahrir Square or something in Pakistan. But there is an understanding now more than ever, and that did not start with Imran Khan, as Dr. Siddiqa said. It has been happening, I would say, like it has been happening since the 70s, the MRD movement in the 80s, and the Benazir, Nawaz Sharif, the Charter of Democracy, and the lawyers' movement, all that. So it has been an evolution, but people now, a common person, understands, and it has also because they have come to it also because of social media, of mainstream media. The world has changed. The region is changing. The world is changing, and that's why people now consider this like they have a better understanding of what is happening in Pakistan. So people are quite unhappy with the military. Military will continue to because the economic stakes are huge for the military. They are not going to go away. And the other institutional players will kind of try to assert. Imran Khan is trying to assert himself to an extent that he will have a bargaining power again, that the military generals say, okay, let's sit down and work together. Let's find a way. But that's all about it. It's not about challenging to tackling the structural problems that Pakistan Pakistan has. This is not going to go. This is the main issue in my opinion. And we talked about Khan's, but one important thing, which is my last point, is that despite this conflict, this institutions, the judiciary, the executive, the military, there is always a conflict and tug of war, the tussle. But at the same time, Pakistan is a security state. It was founded as a security state. The binding forces, the forces that bind this country together is the military and Islam, and the narrative critical discourse analysis that Tehseen was talking about. These are the binding forces. And what would you do if you take either Islam away or the military? Military is the custodian of the Islamic ideology, obviously. And so all this is about, if the politicians also understand that, do they want to change the very nature of the security state of Pakistan? Do they want to challenge the army to an extent that this binding force? Do they challenge the Islamic narrative? They don't, and they won't. So to an extent, when it comes to, when I was also listening to Asad Omar's press conference that Dr. Siddiqa earlier spoke about, he was also talking about this whole Islamic narrative and also the military and the sacrifices. This is something which I think nobody in Pakistan is, political players are not looking at. I think they don't have the capacity, once, the power, two, and also the understanding. And also, if there is an understanding, they are the beneficiaries of the security state, and that's something. They will always fight for power. They will always try to get more power. They will always want to come into power, with or without the support of the military, with the support of the military more. But they will not challenge the very foundations, the fundamentals, these binding forces of the state. That is the Islamic narrative and its custodian, the military.
Can I very quickly come in?
Please, Ayesha.
Because I completely agree with what Shamil said, but let me go back to your issue of judiciary. I think it's important to note that judiciary seems to be backtracking. I mean, from the position 10 days ago, before May 9th, when the Supreme Court, or part of the Supreme Court, was very aggressively pro Imran Khan, now it seems to be backing down. I think one critical thing which needs to be taken into account is that judiciary and judges, individual judges, have stakeholders that they want to address. So there is almost like it's a populist judiciary. That is a flaw which is set into the judiciary in Pakistan, dating back to Iftikhar Chaudhry movement in 2006, 2007. So everyone has their clientele, judges, individual judges, and groups of judges. So, some have progressives and liberals, others PTI supporters, etc. And this is how they were playing the game. Also important to note that as the Chief Justice of Pakistan took up this battle against one of his own colleagues, Justice Qazi Faiz Isa, the battle between the judges has become very ugly and very intense. And this is something which will continue. The manner in which the popularization of judiciary has damaged the judiciary, it is less of an effective stakeholder in changing civil-military relations.
Thank you so much, Ayesha, for this additional contribution. We are coming, unfortunately, already to an end. I mean, not to the end. We are already at the end. We have already overtime, but as you all know, we don't have a crystal ball, so we can't predict the future. But I'm hoping that this webinar gives our audience some ideas how the immediate future of Pakistan could further develop. We heard several things, opportunities, scenarios like perhaps the exile of Imam Khan. There could be a ban or destruction of the PTI. We could have perhaps more violence, or hopefully not. We might see a military rule. So let's hope for the best. I think I speak for all of us when we say nobody's interested in anarchy and instability in Pakistan. So let's keep the fingers crossed that we will witness soon an improvement of the situation. And by having said this, I want once again thank you all for your time and for your wonderful contribution, insights, and looking forward to a potential repetition or ongoing next round of our SDF conversations.
Thank you so
much, and
Thank
wish
you.
a nice afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you are.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Wolf.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, everybody.